The Keyboard Chronicles is proudly supported by Elk Electronic in Australia. Elk Electronic provides high-quality service and repair of synthesizers and keyboards, and also aims to encourage community interaction and learning through meetups and workshops. Find us on Facebook and Instagram, or check out elkelectronic.com.au for more about us. We hope you enjoy this podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host, David Holloway, and it's great as always to be here with you. And it's also brilliant to have Paul Bindig here with me. How are you, Paul?
I'm great, thanks, David.
Good. Another big show, this one. I quite often say this is a bucket list moment, but just from a pure sentimental viewpoint, and I'm interested in what your first purchase was as a teenager, Paul. My very first original album I bought on cassette was Prince's Purple Rain. What was yours?
Mine was In Excess of the Swing, but we've already spoken to Andrew Farris.
We have. Well, there you go. So we've closed a loop here because one of the key personnel on Prince's Purple Rain was Lisa Coleman, obviously as a keyboard player. Also as a vocalist. She sings on the album and she also speaks on the album, if you know the album well and you know exactly the song I'm talking about. It's an amazing album, and so it's an absolute privilege to have Lisa on the show. And not only do we talk about, obviously, the Revolution days, but also a lot about Lisa's work in soundtracks, and also her wonderful solo album and much, much more, including a train wreck anecdote that I quite love. So we hope you enjoyed as much as we had fun making it. Lisa, can't thank you enough for joining us, and it's a lovely Friday night, so I'm not sure this is how you want to spend your Friday evening, but we appreciate it.
What could be better? I mean, talking about myself.
That's right. No, we can't thank you enough. So, I mean, Lisa, I know you're LA born and bred, and we ask each of our guests over the last 12 months how things have been treating them since, obviously, the COVID pandemic. So how has the past 12 to 18 months been treating you?
Oh, well, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's been treating me personally not too bad. I mean, I was working on scoring a show when the pandemic sort of exploded, and Wendy and I worked together, and we had to work from home, both from our separate homes, and we were like emailing cues back and forth, and we didn't really have proper studios at home, but we did the best we could with what we had, and were able to finish off that season. So that was really quite an adventure, all of a sudden just having to leave the studio and satellite.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Lisa. And we are going to cover your soundtrack work in depth later, but it probably is worth asking now. So you actually did work side by side on the cues and so on, which makes sense, but that's how you used to do it.
Yeah, yep, that's right. Me and Wendy do all our scoring work together. Really, for the most part, I've done like one thing without her. But yeah, we work side by side, and it's great usually.
Yeah, well, that's right. Any creative partnership has its tension. So I look forward to covering that later, because that's we talk to a lot of guests who do pretty much a lot of their soundtrack stuff remotely. So it's actually great to hear a pair that are actually working side by side with all the positives and challenges that brings.
Oh yeah.
Lisa, you're a lifetime LA resident. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about your upbringing and what got you into music?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm actually born in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard. The hospital that was on Sunset Boulevard, and I always think that that's funny, yeah, because it's so Hollywood, and and I grew up around Hollywood things and Hollywood people, and my father was a musician, or is a musician. He's still with us, and he would take me to the studio with him when I was a kid. So I got to see everything from he took me to a Wrigley's gum commercial, just, and that was one thing, and then he took me to a Jackson 5 session, and that was amazing. And the Jacksons weren't there, but it was all studio musicians, and Gordy was there, and and I was just I think I was 12, and it just, I don't know, I just knew that that's what I would end up doing, that this was just going to be my life too, and so, and funny enough, I didn't really get my big break until I moved to Minneapolis. So all that LA, being hooked up or anything like that didn't mean anything.
No, that's funny. And so, because, you mentioned being in a Jackson 5 session there at age 12, and then sort of 19 was when things really started to hit big for you. So those years between sort of 12 and 19, what allowed you to develop your musical chops? What was it about keyboards or pianos that really appealed to you in those years?
Oh, wow. Well, the piano, I as soon as I could reach the keys, I started pounding on the piano. So that was always just what I was drawn to. But also, speaking of my dad and my dog, sorry about that.
That's okay.
My dad actually bought an ARP 2600 in 1970 or 71.
Cool.
And my dad bought the ARP 2600 from Tom Oberheim, who was working as a sales rep for ARP. Yeah. So he actually came to our house with the ARP and sort of walked my dad through it. And then they became friends, and he would come over every once in a while. And he wasn't Tom Oberheim yet,
Yeah.
But he was representing ARP, so it was just really cool to me. And I remember the ARP sort of freaked me out.
So I would argue, Lisa, that your Tom Oberheim story is one of the coolest keyboard gear anecdotes out of all our episodes so far, and you're still only a teenager. I think you've done well.
I know, it's incredible. And, and by the time I turned 19 and I joined Prince's band, and one of the first keyboards that he pointed me towards was an Oberheim. And it just, everything just kind of clicked with me, and this is so insane. I'm playing, one of the early Oberheims, and just thinking of Tom coming to the house, and I had to write him a letter in a few years into the gig, and just tell him, that how much I appreciated him and how excited I was to be playing his keyboard.
So, Lisa, going from, Tom Oberheim coming to your door, who's still going strong at 85, I'm pleased to say, again, those pre-Prince bands. How did you work up your chops? You obviously had to have made an impression to be joining a big band in what became the Revolution. So, what was your learning experiences to get to that initial level?
Oh, well, I was classically trained all my life. I started lessons when I was 5, and I just took lessons really up until right before I joined the band. So the funny thing is that he heard me play Mozart, I think, was what impressed him the most. And yeah, a little, it was like, oh, she plays Mozart, she'll be funky. And it didn't really make sense, but but luckily I found I had the funk bone in me.
You obviously did, yeah, absolutely.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, the story of how you came to join Prince's band, are you able to share that with our listeners?
Oh, sure. Sure. It was just a friend of mine, because I was in LA, so I was an import. When he was looking for a female keyboard player, my friend Nikki worked at his management company, and she thought of me immediately, and she called me and said, do you know this guy Prince? And I actually didn't.
Yeah.
So she sent me his album, and I listened to it, and I was like, that would be fun. And it was presented to me as if it would just be 2 months, a road gig, and that's it. And, little did I know that it would just change my life forever. And I was in the band for the better part of the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah. My dog wants to chime in. What am I forgetting? Oh, right.
So he's hitting a nice note each time, though, Lisa. It's good.
I know. It's kind of a little bit of a tubing thing, like kind of a chord.
That's right. And so, I mean, obviously, once you're in the band, Lisa, from the outside, and this is easy for anyone on the outside to say, look, it looked to one of those outfits that, was at least in the league of, say, James Brown's JBs, just super tight, super good musicians, and, what I imagine also to be one of the most driven band leaders in the history of modern music. So, in the live context, what are the standout memories for you as far as, the rehearsal process? And I totally get, we don't need to go through, Prince's band leader and, his approach, because I think that's well documented, but just how you found it as a keyboard player adjusting to his approach and how you got value out of it as a musician throughout those years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually really liked his approach because I was used to that sort of practice. His discipline was great, and it was a lot like being, just practicing your piano. And I came from being dedicated and practicing and, sweating and laying on the floor and, trying it again and again and that sort of thing. So when I got there, I didn't know what to expect, but, joining a band, I didn't know what that was like, even though I had my own bands growing up. And so I was prepared somewhat. This was unlike anything else. Just the vibe immediately, I could tell that this guy was really serious about what he wanted to do. And I thought that was great. I was like, okay, let's work it, And as a keyboard player, I really appreciated that amount of rehearsal, and it really gave you a chance to coordinate, your hands, because there were all these different parts, and if one hand wasn't doing something and Prince caught you, he would say, what are you doing with your left hand? He really wanted, just fill it up. If you just doubled what you're doing with the right hand, or come up with a string part or whatever, so it was a great way to, choreograph your body, switching sounds. And I mean, in those days, with early samplers and things like that, you'd have to time putting in a little floppy disk or, loading a sound before the song started and things like that. So you really needed that time to work those things out.
What was the division of duties like between having more than one keyboard player in the band? How was that determined? Who was doing what parts and which bits, and who was loading the floppy disks and these sort of things?
Yeah. Oh, well, we were both very self-sufficient with our floppy disks and stuff. So we were doing it ourselves. And in the beginning, Dr. Fink handled most of the piano and synth solos. Just because I was the new girl, and I think also because I was a girl, there was some sort of like, can she solo? And, or it doesn't matter. She should just be the girl in the band and look like a girl and act like a girl. So, I had to go through that kind of hazing for the first couple of years until I was taken seriously by the whole band.
Yeah, right.
Some people may not realise this, but I think keyboard players as a broad cohort do. The Revolution was a very keyboard-driven band, and obviously the key albums around the world today, Purple Rain, 1999, that you're also involved with as well, they are incredibly keyboard-driven songs. So, it's not as if you were sitting there in the background, Lisa, as one of two keyboard players. What you were doing was pivotal. And was that apparent to you at the time? Or it did feel like you were just, quite rightly, one of, 6, 7 people working towards one thing?
Oh, yeah. I really felt just part of a machine. It wasn't until, recently that I realized how keyboard-driven it was and how those sounds were so recognizable, and Prince was interesting because he wasn't afraid of a preset, He would just, it was like, okay, you're using an Oberheim, and that was new anyway, and so just use A1, and there you go, there's the sound. But he knew how to use it, and between Matt and I, Dr. Fink, we understood what he was going for, and we just got used to, filter, filter sweeps and, just making the sounds even brighter, so that they'd cut. And, but I don't know. The whole band was such a machine. It really was just like being part of it. The bass was just as important as the hi-hat,
Yeah.
That's right. And from a keyboard player's perspective, Lisa, obviously you'd worked in the studio for at least 2 or 3 of the albums, that essentially it was about translating what you'd already worked through in the studio as far as sounds into the live context, or did you all tend to take a different approach? Obviously Prince is the band leader, but did you take a different approach of working up different sounds or slightly different sounds to work better in the live context?
Yeah, definitely. The studio sounds, you could be more subtle in the studio.
Yeah.
And give things space, but that kind of space is really different live. You can't really be, you have to really, play to the back row, sort of, as they say. And so Matt and I, Dr. Fink, sorry, I keep calling him Matt because he's my buddy Matt.
That's right.
That's cool.
But we would practice together and divvy up the parts. And then, a song like 1999, the main riff, you could play it on organ and it would sound like the record, but you have to add like a layer of strings and then might as well layer it with a horn sound because it's live and it's got to be huge, and and then maybe play a high octave on the piano too, and so then you have your 4 hands playing as many layers as possible. And that was just the way, that's how we did everything. It was just, what are you playing? And, let me enhance that or add a string pad or,
That's right.
try to make the keyboards really cool. Yeah.
So you're getting that really big sound between the two of you.
And what's funny too, Lisa, is that Paul and I were talking before we called in to you today that, and it's funny you mentioned about presets and Prince not being, averse to them, is obviously Paul and I have keyboards where some of those, including the 1999 sound, is now presets on current keyboards.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I was just going to say, Lisa, it's amazing for me because yes, I've got one of my keyboards has a preset called 1999. And it's that riff you just sang to us, and then I can go on YouTube and I can see you playing it in the video clip, and it's just a really cool thing, and it just shows you the really pivotal role that you had and in creating the modern soundscapes that we refer to now.
Wow. That's amazing. And it's hard to, conceptualize that inside. It's just.
And I mean, just one last question around this era, Lisa, is that obviously the revolution sort of reformed, I think it was 2016 or 17. So that's still an ongoing concern. And obviously post-pandemic, you're planning on doing some more shows?
Yeah, I mean, we want to, but we also want to do it in a cool way. We don't. We're not interested in being like a tribute band or something like that. So, I mean, when we did it after Prince died, it made sense. We were grieving, and we, felt like everybody wanted to conjure him and deal with the loss. So it made sense to do that, but now it's a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we're thinking about it and just trying to think of how we could do it in a nice way.
That's right. And I mean, a lot of you, I assume, well, obviously yourself, but I assume a lot of the members are continually writing themselves. And I suppose that's another tricky question: is do you do original stuff when that wasn't the original intention of the band? So you're right; it is a tricky sort of issue, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Because we were coming up with cool jams and things during sound checks while we were doing these gigs, and we were like, do we record these and put it out, or or is that like, does that seem grubby and
that's the thing, it's
weird?
Hard.
Yeah. So we're still thinking.
Yeah,
we'll
great.
See.
I think it would be
positively.
positively.
We never did make it to Australia.
I was actually going to ask you that. Yeah, okay.
It would be well received down here. Yeah, that's a great excuse to come down here, Lisa. And there are a lot of Prince fans down here and Revolution fans down here. I can assure you of that. So it would definitely be an opportunity, I think, for you.
Well, that would be pretty cool.
I wanted to
Send
talk
money.
to you. That's right. We'll send a care package to get you down here, Lisa.
Yeah, there you go.
I wanted to ask you about your very long time collaboration with Wendy Melvoin, who I believe was a childhood friend, and you were bandmates in the Revolution together, but have had a very long collaboration since then as Wendy and Lisa, but even going on to this day, writing music for film and TV together. I'm really interested in how that's evolved over time and how you work together and what's kept it so strong over such a long, extended period of time.
Yeah, it's even I'm thinking it's pretty amazing as I get older, and we're still going strong. I mean, I think it's because I love her as a player. Mm-hmm. I love the way she plays guitar. I love her ears, and I love what she likes about my playing, and it makes me play better. Yep. It's great to have somebody like that in your life that sort of and Prince was that for me as well. But, certain people live in your head, and when you create and you play, you sort of they're sort of there watching and listening, and you're pleasing them, even if they're ghosts. It's I don't know if you guys play and do that too, but it's like a spirit thing. And so Wendy and I connect on that level, and just we're like fans of each other. So as well as just being really good friends, and growing up together, and then being a couple, and then we've been through so much.
That's right.
And it's just, we can work shorthand now. It's like, I'll sit down and play a string passage, and she'll look at me and say, "You can do better," or she'll say, "That was great, keep that, and let me add a guitar thing. I hear a guitar part," and then I do the same thing for her. So it's quite dreamy. It's a good way to work, and especially for composers, on TV and films, it's a lonely job. You're usually by yourself, and just checking in with the director or the producers like once a week or something like that, and the rest of the time you're just in a vacuum wondering if what you're doing is going to work. So,
yeah, well, I actually wanted to ask you a bit about working on as composers together, and I'm thinking about, I know you've done quite a lot of TV work together, and very successfully too, in terms of awards. But my understanding would be that the schedule of writing for a TV show would be fairly intense. How does that work in terms of you? I guess, as you said, sitting side by side and inspiring each other. How do you, between the two of you as professional composers, make that all happen, and you hit the schedules and deadlines you need to hit?
Well, sometimes it's been so intense that we've actually split into two rooms,
right,
and worked on the same show. You do reel 3, I'll do reel 4, and
gotcha.
And we have to do it that way. But it's the TV schedule especially is always really intense, and we have 3 days to do 45 minutes or something like that, and
wow.
It's and so even more better to have a partner, because there's so much work.
Of course.
Yeah.
And what have you, over that time, Lisa, as far as, as you know, compared to playing live, doing soundtrack and background music work is an incredibly different beast. What chops from your live and studio days helped you in this respect, but also what were the big learning curves for you in this area?
Oh, wow, great question. What's really funny is being in, again, it's so funny that I keep bringing Prince up, but doing live shows with Prince, you had to keep your eyes on him the whole time, because he'd give you cues, and he'd, do things that he'd want us to embellish. If he did something, or, flicked his hip and Bobby hit a cymbal, he would be like, "Yay, Bobby," or if he slid to the microphone and I did a slide on the keyboard, he'd be like, "Yay, Lisa." So in a way, that's what I do when I'm scoring a scene. I just watch the scene go by, and I, play whatever the character is doing. It's sort of like being another actor or something. You have to kind of understand what the scene is doing, and then support the actor and give them a symbol on the one, if I don't know.
It's a really good point. Yeah, it's a really good point, that because no one's made that link before. But you're right, particularly when you've played in a band like that is or there's some choreography there, but also a huge amount of improvisation. So you've just got to be on your toes like you do when you're doing soundtracks.
Exactly, because doing the score is all improvisation, and you just have to be in tune with it, and and if you don't have to look at your hands, that's a plus.
That's right.
So practice staring straight ahead and don't look at your fingers. My piano teacher used to make me practice with my eyes closed, and I guess that may have helped me a lot too.
Wow. Yes, absolutely.
It's crazy stuff, but I did it. My teachers were weird. Close my eyes.
It paid off, though. It definitely paid off. And
it totally paid off.
And just as an aside to our listeners, in 2019, I believe it was, there was the album Originals released, showing a lot of those demos and workups of some songs that Prince handed on to other artists. But one of them, well, it was more covered by Sinead O'Connor, that Nothing Compares to You. There's a brilliant video that goes alongside that. And Lisa, I don't believe you're in it, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But there's some just wonderful 5 minutes of footage of the Revolution in rehearsal with Prince as a background to that song. And it is just amazing to watch.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that.
Yeah,
I don't have any idea.
I could see Dr. Fink. It was panned from a long way away, and it didn't show the whole band. So I'm guessing you were there, just not in the shot of this one camera. But it is amazing to see an elite band at work in rehearsal. It's just, it's well worth a look.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. Because there must be a lot of video. Because we used to tape rehearsals every day.
Oh, there you go. That's probably where that's come from then. Yeah, because it was definitely sort of a 1984 rehearsal, I believe. So that's why I knew that if you would have been there. But anyway, it's well worth a check out.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, I have to check it out.
And let's go from one extreme to the other, Lisa, which is your solo piano album for a couple of years back, Collage. So I'm going to give you the funny dog story, then be serious after that. So we had a lovely new puppy come into our lives 3 years ago and had trouble sleeping, and I had to find what I considered some beautiful music to help keep our puppy calm. And this album was one of 3 or 4 albums that was on our playlist every single night to create a calm household, and rightfully so. So this is a beautiful album again for our listeners, Collage. So if we can just probably kick off, Lisa, with what finally inspired you to do a piano solo album?
Well, funny enough, it was an interview, much like this one, that I was scheduled to do. And prior to the interview, they asked if I had any new music to play, and I lied and I said yes. And, and then I realized, I better put something together. And so it came together out of a lie. And I just, I was like, I might as well, it's really time. I've had these piano pieces sitting around. I had just done a couple more improvs, and I was thinking, that's what I'll do. I'll just put these together, and it'll, I have enough that could make, an album. And it was also really timely in terms of, it was right after touring with Revolution, and I sort of needed to get in touch, as silly as that sounds, but with myself again. Mm-hmm. And, go back to my roots, which is the piano. And so it felt really good to just concentrate on that and honor myself as a piano player, because it's really my first love, and I never made a solo record, and people would encourage me to do that, and I just never got around to doing it. I've been busy, thankfully.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great to put this out, and we did it here from home. I just took a bunch of collages and drawings that I did and made the artwork, and we put it out and filled the orders, and I signed them, and we did the shipping. It was all like from home. So it was really cool.
That's very cool. I'm glad you said, Lisa, that it was inspired in part by you wanting to get back in touch with yourself, because in my notes, to me as a listener, I wrote that it sounds introspective, but also very accessible. So for our listeners, it's very easy to get into. The piano sound is beautiful, the playing is wonderful, and Lisa, from my perspective, you're really letting the piano speak, and we can hear what it's saying, and it really gives the album a certain emotional weight. So it's a lovely listen for our listeners, definitely worth checking out. I'm curious to ask you, to me listening, it felt almost in a way like a concept album, in the sense that when you listen to it from start to finish, it really works well as almost like movements of one whole piece. Is that, am I going mad, or is that a deliberately part of the process when you were writing it?
You may be going mad. I don't know you that well. But you sound very stable. I would say that the sequencing was very important to me, and it just kind of worked out when I looked at all the pieces and said, this is where they should go. And it's a relatively short record. I think it's 33 minutes. So, and so, yes, it was important to me that the sequencing was very important to me, that it could be something you could sit down and listen to and have a little journey, and so it ends with sort of, I think, some white noise or something that will just kind of blend you back into real space, wherever you are. So thank you. Very, very nice of you to say all those nice things.
No,
our pleasure.
Yeah, very, very well deserved praise. And anything else bubbling away in the back of your mind, Lisa, as far as a follow up?
Yes, I've been, and especially because of COVID, and been forced into kind of sprucing up my home studio. I've been recording again more piano things, and so I might be up to shipping and receiving again.
That's right. Yes.
That's excellent.
No, that's great. And just before we jump on to the next question, I just wanted to point out that yourself and another iconic artist that started off in the 80s have, I would argue, the two most beautiful piano solo albums. There's yours, and Howard Jones has actually released two piano solo albums, and these would be at least 10 years old now, but they're just stunning pieces of work. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there as well, that mostly for our listeners, Howard Jones's Piano Solos Volume 1 and 2 and Lisa's Collage, that's a hell of a trio of great piano albums right there.
Oh, amazing listening.
Yeah.
Wow, sounds good.
And so let's talk a little bit about gear. I promise not too much, Lisa, but just obviously we talked about presets and iconic sounds and so on. And I've seen interviews where you obviously have a form of a home studio. What's your go-to gear now that you use, obviously with soundtracks and so on predominantly?
Yeah. Well, so much of it is in the computer now, too.
Yeah.
So, Spectrasonics is outstanding, and I use a lot of their stuff, and of course Native Instruments. You got to have your contact player.
That's right.
You got to you got to have your Abbey Road drums, and you got to have your kinetic toys and your all your not Ableton. Albion strings.
Yeah.
What else? But what I do have, which is really cool at home, is I got the reissue of the Prophet 10.
Oh, nice.
And it's
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so nice. It's a monster. I love it. So I have that. I'm hogging it at home. I'm not bringing it to the studio.
I don't blame you. No, that's a beautiful piece of gear. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
And have you ever been tempted to get an ARP 2600 back or one of the recreations? Has that ever been a sentimental temptation?
I have my father's.
Oh, there you go. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to have some work done on it because it was sitting for a long time. He kept it, and because he's a bit of an electronic music composer himself, so he was using it for a long time. So yeah, I love that. It's fun.
That's amazing. And obviously, aside from your long-term collaboration with Wendy, there's obviously, you've done a massive amount of collaborations with different artists, from Joni Mitchell through to Sheryl Crow. And one, just because we're biased, Lisa, being down in Australia, we tend to claim New Zealand's Neil Finn as our own, but even though he is New Zealander. So just a little bit of a recollection on what it was like working with Neil, who I'd argue is, a world-class, well-respected artist. Just interested how that was for you.
Oh, it was fantastic. I love Neil Finn. And it was so opposite musically, not opposite, but just more, where with Prince and the Revolution, we could just sit and play in E forever. Okay, E, go. Neil Finn is like a different chord every beat. It's like, oh my God, and so you have to really you have to concentrate. So it took me a minute to bring those skills back and like, oh yeah, chord changes. That'll be interesting. But it was great. Yeah, I mean, take a listen to some of his songs. It's kind of remarkable, his chords.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful songwriter, no question at all.
Oh, such a good songwriter, yeah.
With your really extensive background, so playing, in bands as a teenager, and then into a really high-profile act such as the Revolution, and then the Wendy and Lisa collaboration, and then now the work you're doing in various soundtracks plus your own solo work. It's a really vast library of experience, and I'd love to know what would be some key lessons that you would pass on to other keyboard players that you can share, that things you've learned.
Wow. Well, practicing with your eyes closed is actually
there you go.
It actually makes great sense, and it'll free you up. I don't know. I've learned so much, and I've been so lucky. And I would say, really get to know yourself as a player, and I think improvisation is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, coming from the classical world, that's kind of anathema. It's sort of, why would I improvise when I can play the greatest music ever written?
Mm-hmm.
They sort of look down on it, and then other people just simply can't do it because it's just so foreign.
Yeah.
But if you really, just if you know your keyboard, just know your keyboard, and know your scales or whatever, and that's all in your hands. Just get that stuff in your hands, and then know yourself as a person, and play what makes you happy.
Yep, great.
That's what I do.
That's what it's about. And speaking of playing what makes you happy, Lisa, are there any other artists that are on your bucket list that you'd love to work with down the track, or other projects you're passionate about developing in the future?
I'm constantly thinking things until somebody asks me, and I can't think of
That's
anything.
right. No, that's okay. That's a normal approach.
I know. So the ballpark answer is yeah. There's probably a handful of people I'd love to collaborate with, but I can't think of them
No,
right
that's
now.
okay. Not a problem. And just based on Paul's question about your huge experience to date and, what's likely to be a much longer and incredibly successful career to come, do you feel like you have a book in you one day? Do you feel like you want to get your experiences down on paper and actually, talk about what you've learnt and what's going into the future and so on? Is that ever been a prompt for you?
I think lately it's starting to kind of dawn on me that, especially from the outside looking in, it's like I've had a very interesting life. But I don't know if I have enough, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm as interesting as my life has been. So I would need to tell lots of good stories and not just be a cool person.
No,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's right. And I think that is the challenge with any biography or autobiography. And that's what people are interested in, is the stories. And I mean, and I'll probably throw to this now, one of our regular questions to guests is, what's your most memorable train wreck on stage? So where things went absolutely not right. And they're the sort of stories people love hearing about. So just for interest, is there an awful on-stage train wreck, doesn't matter who with or what it was, that stands out for you?
Oh, sure. There's a couple of them that were really good. I know what I'll tell you guys. Well, I was sick on the road once with Prince, and I was like literally throwing up in a bucket on stage.
Oh dear.
And so we were playing Controversy, and the Lord's Prayer comes up, and we're all doing the Lord's Prayer. And I was just so spaced out that I did a horn punch in the middle. I don't even know why. I said one of the lines, and then I just went, BOW! and I was like, what did I just do? It was just, I don't know. It was just so weird, and in the quietness of the Lord's Prayer.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
Was the horn punch at least in the correct key?
It was in the right key, yes.
Oh, there you
absolutely. Go. Yeah. So maybe it was art. I don't know.
Right.
It was art. You said it was important to improvise, so it was just improvisation.
That's right.
There you go. It's my guardian angel.
And what's coming up for you in the next year or so, Lisa? What have you got planned aside from obviously an incredibly busy composing career?
Yeah, I've got 3 shows coming up, so that'll keep me busy. But I really do want to work on a solo album and or another Wendy and Lisa album, because we have been writing quite a lot.
Great.
We just haven't been focused at a concept or anything like that. But we've got a lot of material now that we can go back and look at and maybe release some of it.
Oh, that's
so
brilliant.
that's what I would like to do. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'd like to go to Australia for a vacation.
I think it's time for a GoFundMe to be set up. I think there'll be
I
lots
reckon.
of people happily do it.
Yes.
Come on. Help me out.
Yeah, come on, dig deep, everyone. Let's get Lisa to Australia.
Yeah.
I would argue you performing your actual solo album at the Opera House would be a treat as a side gig.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Wow.
No
What a
pressure,
fantasy
Lisa.
that
No
is.
pressure. It's fine.
That's insane. Woo!
Lisa, we're just about coming to the end of our time together, but we love to ask all our guests a question about if Well, we ask if you could tag a keyboard player, which basically means that if there were someone who you would love to hear interviewed, maybe someone that you've always admired, a fellow keyboard player, someone you've been a fan of, that you would love to hear us interview on this show.
Oh, well, most of them have passed away.
That's the thing.
Unfortunately.
And we're happy with dead suggestions as well, just for interest. But
yeah, it makes it harder for us.
It makes it harder for us, but happy for you to mention those that have departed.
Well, I mean, two of my tops would be Zawinul and Bill Evans.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
You know, those would both be really good interviews.
Yeah, great picks.
Make it happen.
Yeah, all right. That'll get you to... Will you promise to come to Australia if I get an interview with either of those?
Yes. You've got a deal.
That's right. And then last question for the road, Lisa, and I know your darling dog will be distressed if we keep you much longer. So Desert Island is 5 albums that have totally inspired you that you maybe you could live without them, but would still need to take to a desert island if you had no other choices.
Okay. The very first 3 albums that I owned in my life made me sort of who I am. Stevie Wonder's Talking Book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Joni Mitchell, Blue.
Wow, wonderful. Yeah.
And Lazar Berman playing Liszt B minor sonata.
Brilliant.
And then I would add a dog whistle. I would add any Sly and the Family Stone record.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe a simple matter of conviction, Bill Evans.
Lovely. And just as a very brief supplementary question, you mentioned Joni Mitchell, Blue, and I know you collaborated. I haven't actually heard the story, so I apologise, but it must have been surreal to have had that as an influential album, and I believe you played Pictionary with her?
Yes. Yes, you heard that.
Yeah, I haven't heard the story, but I just know that you had, yeah.
Yeah, we were working in the same studio, sort of in different rooms, and that's sort of why we ended up singing on her record. She asked us to come over and do some background vocals, and at first we didn't believe her. We thought it was just like, oh, it's just studio talk. Everybody does that, just come and play on my record. And so we kind of didn't show up, and she got really upset. And that's like one of the worst memories of my life. I upset Joni Mitchell. But she gave us a little talking to and told us that she was serious. And so we got right to business.
And so was that in what was a pretty surreal environment anyway? Was that something that felt a bit surreal on its own to you?
Absolutely. I mean, and I still... Wendy and I are going to play Scrabble with Joni next week. We still know her, but it's like it's new every time. For me, I'm like a dog. I'm like every time I see her, it's like, it's Joni Mitchell. It's like I am a dog. And it's new every time.
That's a great way to finish off. And can I say, for some of us, Lisa, seeing you playing solo at the Opera House would be the equivalent experience for us. So you never know.
Definitely.
If we can score that Bill Evans interview, we look forward to having that same surreal moment ourselves. But no,
that'll be us.
Okay.
Yeah. That's Lisa Coleman at the Opera House.
Right.
Yes.
But yeah, we can't thank you enough for taking the time, Lisa. It's been an absolute pleasure, and obviously with your career, we could spend 14 hours going through more specific stuff. But appreciate the time you have taken, and look forward to hearing what's to come next. I know we're very excited.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
So there we have it. What a pleasure it was, and a huge shout out to Lisa's dog as well.
Yes, interjected into the conversation, but that's okay. Dogs need their time to speak as well.
No, it was wonderful, and Lisa was a fountain of knowledge, and just again, I know we do say it all the time, but she's an artist. I would love to have spent 10 hours or 14 hours, as I think I said in the interview, just going through the real specifics of some of the great experiences she's had. But unfortunately, we never have that time. But she was a wonderful, wonderful guest, and was very generous.
Yeah, she sure was. I don't know about you, David, but I know as a young teen, when I first started watching those video clips of Prince and the Revolution, I used to look at that band and I used to go, these are the coolest people. They're so cool. They're so good. They're sexy. They're chic. And now that I've had a chance to speak to Lisa, my opinion has not changed. She was very, very cool.
Yeah. And just one of those cohort of bands. I mean, I mentioned James Brown's JB's, whether it's Weather Report or Chuck Berry's band or whatever, you knew that when you're in that band, you had to be top notch. And the only way you would survive in that band is if you were top notch. And she certainly met that in spades.
No doubt.
So yes, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back again in the next few weeks. But just a reminder, you can keep in touch via a few means. Our website is www.keyboardchronicles.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Keyboard Chronicles, and on Twitter at the Keyboard CHR1. And if you like good old-fashioned email, then do drop us a line at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. Now, Paul, we have our many valued patrons, but again, I want to give a special shout-out to Greg at
the Chrome user group on Facebook.
Yeah, so Greg, love your work and appreciate your ongoing sponsorship. If you'd like to become an official supporter, and we don't have to mention you, if you prefer not to, you can be nice and anonymous. We'll still take your money, but Greg, we very much appreciate. So we do have a Patreon account where for the price of a coffee a month, you can help us go from strength to strength, and that's at patreon.com/Keyboard Chronicles. And just as a further aside, the first bonus content has gone to patrons, and there'll be another set of bonus content coming in the next couple of months. And one of the other cool things is we do try and give sneak previews to people on upcoming guests. And where notice allows, we even love the opportunity of you putting forward the questions you'd like asked. So, do consider that if you can. Paul, huge thank you again for joining me this episode.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And most importantly, to all of you out there, thanks for listening. And we hope to see you again back here for episode 40.